Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Been a while. We'll talk about why it's been so long in just a minute. I actually have one other thing I need to address real quick. And as usual, life happens, right? Like that's where we're at. Life just keeps happening. It do be happening though. That's not the right one. What the heck? Why are you not working, you silly goose? That should be online. Oh, because that's not live yet. That would be why. Start Twitch. You could be live now. Let's see if it works now. All right, all right, all right, all right. No, you're still not working. Why would you do this? Do I not have it enabled in here? No, I do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The chat does not seem to want to work. Test. If it doesn't start working in the next minute or two, we will just understand that that's just the way it is. Bam, 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 bam. Edit settings. We are live, right? It says we're live. Am I just like kind of stupid? I feel like maybe I am. Has it been that long that I just don't know what I'm doing? It'd be funnier if that were the case. It says I'm live. Let's turn it up. No, that's really loud. Maybe. Nope, that's working. Okay. So it's all working, except this one thing. So I may have to go in and manually fix it. And that is what it is. We're not going to worry about that right now. What that's actually going to let me do is really not much of anything right now. So I wanted to talk to everybody about Firefight. Before we dig in, I want to give a big shout out to Military Gaming Command. Again, I am a veteran, and they are a community of gaming veterans. They use gaming, they are dedicated more towards the video gaming side of it, but they support other veterans with their video gaming, going out to hospitals and things like that, giving out switches and stuff to injured veterans to help them kind of get through their time of need. And they have a really good community. They do a really good job of supporting each other. It's fantastic. And I always want to try to shout them out when I can. So big shout out to them. You can go to militarygamingcommand.org, check out what it is they do, and donate, because donating's cool. So this anything else I need to get touch on? If you're out there and you're semi-local and you like Blood Bowl, the 5th of October is a Blood Bowl tournament. I am running that, and that will be in Knox, Indiana. That will be at Knoxtoberfest, so feel free to come check it out. You could play in it, or you can just watch. That's fine. I'll also be running and hosting an Old World event in the same building. So again, feel free, come check it out. And I've got a 40K league recap that I need to do, and so that's pretty cool. I actually went through. We did a 4-round league. I ended up coming out on top, 4-0 with my Drukari, and it was mostly just Kabalites. I'll do a whole big recap video on that hopefully this week. I meant to do all of this a little sooner than Tuesday, but wife had pneumonia. Was bed rest for basically 2 weeks, a week and a half. Son had pneumonia. Sorry, dog was like nipping at my toes and it freaked me out. Give me a second. Let me make sure she's okay. She doesn't usually nip at my toes. She just really wanted out. So, sorry about that. Again, if you're watching, sorry if the chats aren't working properly. I think I kind of goofed something up, and seems to be the multi-chat doesn't want to work. So that being said, wife had pneumonia, kid had pneumonia, both were on bed rest for about 10 days. And so I've been trying to work and keep track of kids and the old lady and just do everything, which is why everybody hasn't heard from me in a bit. So again, I apologize. This past weekend, I did get a chance to go to the Michigan GT. This is my first time getting out there. Getting out there. And I played in a game called Firefight. If you've never played Firefight, we'll kind of touch on what it is. I'm going to do a whole video. If you watch my Halo series, I'm going to do a whole video kind of like the Halo series where I kind of give you my initial reactions to it, which I guess is going to be a lot harder. It'll be more retrospective of what my initial reactions to it were, and like a more detailed breakdown of how I feel about it after getting a bunch of games under the belt. When I showed up for the tournament, I had approximately 3 to 4 games under the belt. I fully expected to get, just like hammered. I really thought I was going to get hammered, just because I I go into most tournaments with that perspective. Even when I was peak 40K and I was winning tournaments and doing well at GTs and going to like US Opens and having a winning record and doing all these things. I went into most events just like, man, I'm going to lose every game. And that helps me. It helps me take that mindset because then even if I win, I'm excited. I'm happy. It doesn't just feel like, oh, I should have won anyway. And when I lose, it takes the sting out quite a bit. Like, I kind of figured I was going to lose. Haha, that's okay. So it kind of helps me keep my frame of mind and remember that it's just a game. You know, sometimes when we're playing in tournaments, especially, we can get caught up in the like, I gotta win, I gotta win, I gotta win. Give me a second. I gotta chat. There we go. Late to the party, but I'm here now. Hey, what's up, buddy? That's Garrett. Actually, Garrett's one of the people that's been learning Firefight with me, so that's pretty cool. So I try to take that mindset into um, tournaments. Is I'm gonna lose this game. Every game I'm going to lose, and it's okay. I don't have to be the best, and it does. It does help me, especially at events, to kind of remember that it's a game and that it's okay if you lose, and you don't have to get all caught up because, especially at tournaments, we tend to be more competitive humans, and nobody likes to lose. Like, there are definitely people who can kind of shrug it off better than others, but at the end of the day, I think 99.9% of the people in the world just don't want to lose every game. So, before we hop into the tournament results, let's talk about what Firefight is briefly. And as you can see on the screen, Firefight, which is in its second edition, is Mantic Games. Let's see if I've got them. Yeah, you can't really see it, so let me slide it down. Mantic Games. And they're the company behind Kings of War and the new Halo game. So they've got a few things. They did a Mars Attacks board game. They've got a few things under the belt. They've been around for a few years. Uh, you know, let's look at their stuff, right? They've got Kings of War. They've got a game called Armada, which is like ship combat. I haven't really looked at it. I don't necessarily have a big vested interest in that. Dead Zone, which is kind of their kill team, and that's actually what the Halo Flashpoint game is based off of. It's based off the Dead Zone rules. And then Firefight, and then they have like their board games division and The Walking Dead and all these other things because they do some IP stuff where they license IPs and make games like Worms. Like I said, they had a Dungeon Ball game, or not Dungeon Ball, Mars Attacks game, and then they've got Dreadball, which is kind of their version of Blood Bowl, ish. And so that's where it's at. This is what they do. They've been around for at least 10 years. I couldn't give you an exact date, but I know 10 years ago I had played Kings of War a few times, and I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was a really young game. So it just kind of felt very bleh to me. But I'm sure it's a lot nicer now that they've had 10 years to refine it and tweak it. I haven't played it again. But we're not here to talk about Kings of War. We're here to talk about Firefight. So Firefight is in their Warpath universe. They have their own backgrounds and stuff for it. They've got their own armies. So if we look at Firefight, I didn't want to get started with Firefight, but that's okay. Can I just beep, beep, I'm a sheep. All right, so we have all these different armies. We've got Asterians, Enforcers, Forge Father, GCPS, Marauders, Mason Labs, Night Stalkers, Plague, and Vermin. I'm going to do my best to give you some sort of 40K analog because I know a lot of the people who are going to be watching this are going to be 40K. Asterians, from my understanding, is kind of like a Craft Worlds analog. I don't know. Part of me almost wonders if they're more like a Tau analog, but my understanding is they're kind of space elves. I haven't seen them on the table. I haven't really seen them do much of anything. I don't know enough about them to be able to say for certain what they are. I haven't even looked through their rules. I know like this dude's real handsome. I do like this. Let's see if we can pull up a better picture. There we go. Pretty cool model. I like it a lot. You know, I don't necessarily have a desire to build or paint that army, but I do enjoy that specific model's aesthetic. But like I said, my understanding is they're kind of like space elves. So we can look at that. So we got space elves, we got enforcers, which is actually what I ended up taking to the tournament. I will go through my list for everybody. This will be a longer video. If you've never watched one of my videos tend to run on the long side because I like to chat. So sorry for that if that's not what you're into, but that's what I'm here for. Enforcers are kind of like their Space Marine analog. They feel pretty weird, and I'll do a bigger dive into them towards when I actually get into it. Uh, but Forge Fathers are their dwarves. So if you like little chunky dudes that can take hammers and also guns, that's what they are. I would not say that they are a Votan analog or a Squats analog outside of like visual. They're almost more like fantasy dwarves in the way they play from what I've seen. I haven't seen them on the table, but I have read through their rules. You don't get a large volume of shooting from what I've seen, but the shooting you get tends to be very efficient. Like it higher AP, for example, does extra damage, things like that. And again, if you're watching this and you play Forge Fathers and I'm way off mark, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm just telling you these are my experiences from my first read through of them, and maybe I'm way off. GCPS is like a guard analog, and I think this army actually looks really cool. And that's the one thing I like about this game is that A, it's inexpensive enough that having multiple armies doesn't cost you your kidneys, and B, uh, the models have definitely improved over 10 years. When I first looked at Mantic's stuff, a lot of their models were kind of like, eh. But now that they've had 10 years to build up their product and create their player base and then improve on their sculpts, a lot of them are actually pretty cool. And GCPS is an army I'm like, hey, that's actually pretty dope. I would probably build that if I didn't already have two armies and potentially a third. We'll talk about that later. Marauders are orcs, and from what I've seen, they're orcs. They're everything you expect out of orcs. You know, shooting is just like high volume trash dice, and you're just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. You get a lot of units, and it's a lot of just like go go go. Uh, it's a neat army. They've got some cool gimmicks. They've got some neat stuff. And then Mason Labs, I don't know that they have a 40K analog. What they kind of remind me of is like the Institute from Fallout or Umbrella Corp from what's that game? Resident Evil. There we go. So because a lot of their stuff is like you've got golems or some sort of robotic construct or some sort of chemical engineered thing, and they're a medical corporation. So that's kind of the tone I get from them. Night Stalkers are new, and I believe they're actually in beta testing. So, but they kind of have a demon's feel to them, from what I can tell. Again, if I'm way off on that one, let me know. Plague is my other army I'm starting to build. I actually ended up, I bought the Marauders Enforcer starter box. And I had played orcs for so long in 40K, and I even have orcs for Old World Fantasy. And I was just like, I don't need more orcs in my life. So I ended up trading them off, giving them away, whichever it was. Don't remember. And then ended up buying the Plague starter box because they are kind of like the Hive, right? If or the Flood, I should say. If you want a good analog, the Flood from Halo is a good analog. Like you get zombies and you get ghouls, but they're almost like, and I'm talking gameplay. I'm not talking background. They're almost like like how the Flood have the guys that only move forward and attack, and it's only melee, and then they've got the Flood that can carry the guns. Like that's more what it seems like it's in line with. And then Veerman, the closest thing you could compare them to is like they're a Skaven analog, but they're not just like a copy paste Skaven army. That is another that is the third army that like I may be picking up because one of my buddies wants to get into the game. And he's trying to decide if he's going to get the one player Forge Fathers starter box. But I'm like, bro, if you get the 2-player starter box, I'll split it with you. You'll save some money. You can keep literally everything in that box that isn't the Ratmen. I'll just take the Ratmen. Because, like, that was the army that I had always looked at going, this is what I would want to play if I were going to play this game. And I'm just kind of like, everything looks so neat. I really enjoy it, and it's been pretty cool. So that's what Firefight is. So if you don't know, and then as far as gameplay, and again, I'm going to try not to dwell on this too much because I want to do a standalone video about how the game plays, and I'll probably try to get some battle reports in the next month or two. But as far as how the game plays, easiest way to put it is you get your army list just like you would in any other war game. You generate command points semi-randomly. And when I say semi-randomly, you roll what are called command dice. And they just have like a different numbers on them. And each number tells you how many command points you generate. So everybody always rolls 3 black command dice, period, end of discussion. And I think 0 appears on those dice twice. So you have a 33% chance for each die to generate 0 command points. And then every commander or tactician unit you bring generates additional command dice. And then you just roll them all, you add it all up, and that's how many command points you get. And then the command points are spent on what they call orders. So again, if you're from 40K, it's kind of like stratagems, but it's more in line with how Lord of the Rings uses their command points. Because remember, that's actually the game GW made that started the whole command point thing for GW. And it's more in line with 3rd edition AOS because you have to be within a certain range of your command units for the most part in order to send orders. And so it's not like 40K where you just spend command points and you just get to drop whatever stratagem you want on whatever unit you want. It's more a AOS style where it's like I have this leader here and I have to have the leader within 12 inches in order to issue the order to this other unit. And the orders are a big part of how armies get their flavor as well. So, like enforcers have a lot of orders that support shooting and a few that support mobility, but not much in the way that supports melee. So, they're not necessarily a melee army, unless you're me. And we'll kind of dig into that because I think that was one of the things that really threw people off. But that being said, that's kind of how it works. It's alternating activations. One of the orders you can use, you spend a command point to chain activate a second unit as soon as you're done activating. That one isn't technically in order. You just spend command points to do it, and you can only do it once before your opponent has to go. So you couldn't just spend 5 command points to activate 5 extra units. You could activate 1 extra unit, then your opponent has to go, but then you could activate 1 extra unit and then your opponent has to go. So you can never activate more than 2 in a row before your opponent has to go, unless your opponent's out of things to activate, obviously. So that's kind of how the game works, right? And like I said, I'll do a big in-depth video. We'll talk about cover. We'll talk about all these other things a little bit later. But now let's talk about my list, okay? And Firefight List Builder. I will do my best to make sure that that is very visible for everybody. So this is my list. Let's see. Let's hit the play button because that'll really Spice it up. Is that visible? It's visible enough. Okay, so I had one leader or one command unit, okay, and it was a peacekeeper captain. And before we dig into why I built my list the way we did, let's just start with the fact that I literally bought the starter box, the 2-player starter box, and then I just bought random units from there because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So, the peacekeeper captain, obviously, so almost every infantry in the enforcers is anti-grav. And if you don't know what anti-grav is, they're all basically like flying when you use the verbiage from other games. If you are going to do a 40k analog, everything flies, even if it only moves 6. All right, so anti-grav inspiring just lets you reroll nerve tests within, I think it's 6. It might be 12. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He just lets you reroll nerve checks. Resilient 1. Resilient 1 is pretty handy. It lets you force your opponent to reroll a successful damage die because there's no wound roll. It's just hit die, damage die. There's no wound roll. So you can force your opponent to reroll a successful damage die because it's resilient 1. If it were resilient 3, you'd reroll 3 successful damage dice, or up to, I should say. And you get to pick. So if your opponent has like an AP4 weapon and an AP0 weapon, you want to force them to reroll the AP0 weapon because those are going to be harder for them to get through. The AP4s are just going to punch through. And you actually can't resilient anything that's AP3 or better anyway. But Tactician, he gives me 1 extra green command die, and then Controlled Fire. Controlled Fire is meaty because that gives you access to a charge reaction. I forget what the charge reaction is actually called, but let's call it Controlled Fire. Controlled Fire lets you basically shoot things when they charge you as long as you haven't activated or you're on Overwatch. And then Commander Orders, Firestorm, Aura. So you spend 1 command point. That's what this 1 over here means. And then he gets the Firestorm Aura, which gives you, it's a 12-inch aura. All your units gain weight of dice 1, meaning you reroll any 1 hit die when you shoot. And then Vicious for shooting, which is reroll damage dice of 1. And you don't have an option on Vicious. Sorry about that. So the way Vicious is worded is you have to. You can't choose not to. So Commander Orders, Firestorm. So for 1 command point, he can activate his aura. Bam. Why did I take him? Because that's all I had. I had five peacekeepers total in the starter box. 1 of them became a captain. 2 of them became regular peacekeepers, and 2 of them became defenders. They all have Dominator rifles. My experience so far is that the Dominator rifles are very good. I could be wrong, but that's been my experience with them. They do have energy gauntlets, but I have not gotten in a situation where I'm like, hell yeah, I want to charge with these things, outside of maybe slamming them into a vehicle, because they just aren't consistent enough, because the unit only throws 6 dice, right? 2 dice for the captain, 2 dice for each boy, 6 dice, just not consistent enough to win assaults. Except for into like a mule or some kind of buggy, right? Or some kind of transport. Now I have 2 units of enforcer operatives. They're 5-man squads. It's one. The sergeant just has a Gendling laser pistol and an energy gauntlet. Why did I take that? I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just building models, and I was like, hell yeah, these guys look pretty cool with the little fisto and the little like blick blow. And I was like, so all my sergeants, doesn't matter the squad, every sergeant is energy gauntlet, laser pistol. Why? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And that was like such a benefit for me because I didn't know anything. I was just like, this looks cool. Let's do it. What I did find out is that it does give me like a little bit of melee if I do end up having to charge something with this squad. It's not great, but depending on what I charge, those energy gauntlets could be the difference between failing an assault, or I shouldn't say failing, losing an assault and winning an assault. Now, I do have 3 of them with the laser rifles. And the laser rifles, you've got some orders that are very good. And the laser rifles and even the pistol work well with those orders. One of them lets you shoot twice, with your trademark weapons. So the pistol would shoot twice, the rifles would shoot twice, but they have to target a different target than the first time you shot. And then I think it's 2 CP, like one additional command point, and then they get an extra AP. Really good order. I think I used it in 2 different games. Really good order. The burst lasers, awesome. Pinning is phenomenal. That's a big part of what I've seen from the game is that pinning lets you kind of help mitigate your opponent's action economy. So having a couple units with pinning with enforcers is pretty solid simply because you can just like, hey, I'm getting out activated. How do I prevent like some charges? You pin them. Now they can still charge because they can still advance, which is just a normal move for you 40k players, right? And again, I'll break it all down, but the long and short of it is you can simple or short action walk into combat, but you don't really get any bonuses if you just walk into combat. If you run or advance or sprint is the term for this game. If you sprint or run into combat, then you get bonuses. But that is a complex action, a long action, I think is the term. So now they do have controlled fire. What that means is, again, if you try to charge me, I get to shoot you. It is -1 to hit, but again, extra shooting is good, and it ignores any kind of line of sight restrictions. It's super good. There's no reason not to do it. And then, so we got 2 units of those. We had 2 units of assault enforcers, and most of the guys I had spoken to, and really, like, I think my 3 opponents, none of them had really played against assault enforcers. So they were really surprised when those guys just went into things and just started blending stuff because they get 2 dice each. And even though they're not like a really big unit, it's 5, so I'm only getting 10 total attacks. If I can run into combat, I'm hitting on 3s on a D8. So I'm like 3 plus. I'm at 75% hit rate, right? And they're AP1, so into like a unit of Marauders, I need 4s to damage you on a D8. So it's one of those like pretty solid. Like they are pretty good. And then the counter charge is phenomenal because it's another charge reaction. And what it does is if you charge a unit with counter charge, I get to charge you. And it just negates your ability to fight first. And that was really important because I played a plague player and he charged into them. And I told him, like, I just so we're clear, if you've never played a game with me, I will almost always over inform you, because he went to charge and I was like, hey, just so you know, that's got counter charge. I'm not trying to deter you. I just want you to have all your information. Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate it. And he charged it anyway. And I forget what it was. It was like one of the bigger dudes, but he ended up killing like 2 or 3 of my guys, but I just flat out killed him. And because I killed him, I won the assault. And what I was able to do is just like kind of reposition, and I kept another one of his leader units like boxed in. So it was one of those like counter charge. The game I lost, and we'll get into my record later, but the game I've lost it to Marauders. And we didn't get to finish the game, but again, I'll kind of go through it game by game in a little bit. But counter charge was like a problem he had to solve. And because I have an order that lets me go into Overwatch after I activate, so like he couldn't just charge me willy-nilly because he'd risk losing his unit and maybe I lose mine, but that wasn't a good trade for him because it was like skyscrapers, for example, which are Storm Boys, again for you 40k guys, players, sorry. So again, I really like the assault enforcers. I'm glad I have them. I would honestly run more. I felt they were very good. Enforcer drones. So let's start off with the fact that I spent the whole game, our whole tournament, not even realizing they were constructs, which means they can't get pinned. So like people were pinning them, and I was just like, yeah, pin token, sure, man, because they didn't know if they were constructs. That's my fault. I was like, yeah, they're pinned. And really, the big thing I was doing with them is just like it was just a cheap unit at 55 points that I could just kind of throw somewhere, get activations. Their unit strength 1, so like on control, I could just put them in an empty table section and control it. So it was just like a cheap unit that I could kind of throw around is really how I approach them. They do have shotguns. Their shotguns are pinning, 3 shots each. So again, like not bad. And then they're elusive 2, which is like when you shoot them, I can make you reroll 2 hit dice. I also didn't use elusive the whole game. Evade is a charge reaction. Never used that the whole tournament. Like I literally just played these like an idiot, and I still would bring them again. Like they were solid. Again, it's going to be matchup specific, and I understand and respect that. But I had a good experience with them, even with me playing them as poorly as I did. Enforcer jet bikes, I'm not going to lie, early on, I could not figure out how these things were worth it. But again, thanks to my buddy Garrett, like we've been playing together and we've been talking about it quite a bit. And I think he was onto something because I think I have a tendency to try to like move them up too quickly and then they die. So like we had talked about it, he's like maybe you should kind of hold them back and use them as a late game scoring unit as opposed to just like run them up and do damage. And so that was kind of the approach I had taken. And go, go, go is a phenomenal order for them because advanced training, if you don't know, you don't have to be within range of a commander in order to give an order. So almost every unit, if not every unit, has advanced training in the Enforcer's army. Now, they're bulky, so they can't go into transports. They're elusive, which I also just totally forgot about, never used. They scout, which I knew, and they have evade, but evade never really came up. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with these. I have one with a Dominator rifle and one with a burst rifle or burst laser. Again, mostly for the pinning. The only thing I would change is if I were going to keep bringing them, I think I would try to free up points to bring a third one. Maybe, something like that. I think that's where I would be with that. I think 3 of them would feel really good because that's 6 health at shooting 4 up with 2 Dominator rifles. And like I said, the Dominator rifles just feel pretty good. They're 3 shots at AP1 and they just feel solid. The Peacekeeper Defenders, man, I botched these the whole tournament and they still were solid. They have advanced training, anti-grav, defensible, resilient 1, controlled fire, countercharge, and their armor 8. I didn't realize that they had controlled fire and countercharge, so they could not both, they could either shoot or charge when they get charged. And defensible, I had read somewhere that it did one thing, and then I read it again, and now it does something else. And I don't know if I was just reading like an older edition rule book. I have no idea. But what defensible does is, at the end of their activation, they can just go into Overwatch, which means effectively they can always just shoot you when you charge them or charge you when you charge them. Now, they're not the worst at melee. They effectively have the wrist blades, 2 attacks at AP1. So they're not terrible, but their shooting is just going to be better at 3 attacks, and then the burst laser, so 7 attacks. So like if you're charging me, I'm almost better off just shooting you because I get more dice. Sure, I'm going to hit you on 5s because it's -1, but that's a 50% chance with 7 dice. The math's probably very similar, like now that I think about it, but I can still pin you if you shoot me, or if I shoot you, right, with that burst laser, as long as I get a hit. So, but overall, like these things were pretty solid. Armor 8's real meaty. And then the last 2 units I had, and they were Striders. And again, the Striders were one of those things where it was like, I have no idea anything about this game, just like the drones. And I was like, well, I need some extra points. These are relatively inexpensive models. I actually like the way they look. Let's just pick a couple up and slap them in the list. So I gave one the Tank Buster, which is the Polaris cannon, and then the other one is the Bonker. He's got the chainsword, right? They're armor 7 with heavy armor, so if you don't have anti-tank or anti-vehicle, whatever it is, if your damage die goes through, you have to re-roll it and then get a 5 up. and it was meaty. I think I don't know that there was a game in which they both died. The chainsaw one died game 1. He didn't die game 2. I don't think either of them died game 3. No, he died game 3. I think game 2, neither of them died. But game 2, I ended up losing. Again, we'll get into it. I really like them. The Strider Tank Buster was a great deterrent. I didn't necessarily need it to do anything. As long as it was unactivated, it made my opponent have to really think about where they wanted to put certain things. Because it was just like 2 shots, they're AP4, they're devastating D2 +1. So if you put a vehicle out there, he'll tag that vehicle, he'll mess it up. And then they're anti-tank, so that ignores the heavy armor. And if you hit something with an anti-tank, it pins them. Or no, if they take damage from an anti-tank, it pins them. Brutal. Just a brutal gun. It's only 2 shots, but it's a brutal gun. You can use your commander's aura to give him weight of fire and vicious to make it even more effective. And it is just a brutal, brutal gun. I gave him the marksman upgrade. I believe that gives him, I don't remember what marksman is. Let's find out. Because now, marksman. You can reroll. You have to reroll hit rolls of unmodified 1. So that was my list. And it was a list, right? Like, again, I kind of built it with no real concept on how to play outside of just like, I have a very strong tabletop wargaming background, and we're going to just like use my crossover knowledge from games like 40K and Old World and things like that, and we're going to just kind of hope that works. And for the most part, it did. All right, so round 1, let's see. Is that this one? Is that this? Yes. Round 1. Gentleman's name was Dan. Super nice guy. Really enjoyed my game with Dan. We had a fun time. He had like a McDonald's themed army. It was pretty cool. That's why this is like the arches type of thing up here, this little jet. Like, it was pretty cool. And it was Plague, which I appreciated. Because that is an army I'm already building, so I wanted to see them on the table. The mission, well, I don't remember what it was called, but each player gets 2 objective markers, and then you have to give them to 2 different units. So like I gave mine to this squad of defenders and my regular peacekeepers. Sorry, this squad of defenders and my peacekeepers over here. And then if they were within 12 inches of the middle of the board, you scored, I think it was 1 point. And then if you were like in your opponent's side of the board, you scored more points. Again, I don't remember exactly how many. We ended up finishing, I think, 3 rounds. We didn't finish the game. I was up by 2 points at the end of 3. And honestly, that game, and nothing against Dan, because we're both relatively new players. It's one of those, like, he just had some bad luck. I happen to have some good luck. That's all it was. But I got up there. I was able to score more points. And I might have only even been up by 1, to be honest with you. And then also they had these things called tournament points, were based off of they're almost like a tertiary objective system. And the tournament points, I don't 100% understand, so I'm not going to dig into it yet. But my understanding is that has a lot to do with your placing as well. So, but I ended up getting up there, scored more points. I think the disheartening thing for Dan was he had a big brick of zombies. That's what this is right here. And I just lifted them. I had like these enforcers. They were able to pop up, shoot, and then these enforcers, because I think at one point he had them kind of like out here in this opening. So I was able to tag him with 2, and I just kept throwing dice at him. My defenders right here came up, and we just kept throwing dice and throwing dice and throwing dice. Because I thought, I either deal with this now, or they're going to be a problem later if they get to me. So I just leaned into getting rid of those as quickly as possible. And I think that works. He had his objective here, and he brought it up, and then had to, because I pushed really hard here, and then I had my Strider right here. It forced him to kind of come back around because he didn't want the Strider coming up. So it's one of those understanding firing lanes, like bam, bam. He had some dudes in the building, and I just walked away from him. I was just like, all right, well, they're there. These fellas right here, real fast. I can't think of what the leapers, I think. He had a leapers also over here. And then my jet bikes were back here. You can just see the corner of them. I ended up picking up those leapers. Like I said, we only made it 3 rounds. We had a good time. Had a lot of fun. I really appreciate it because I learned a lot playing with Dan. We did have the judge at the table for quite a bit of it, not because of anything other than we both just wanted to make sure we got things right because I had only played 3 games. Now, if you look at my deployments, most of my units are very centrally located, and then I have a unit here, and then I have a couple units here, and this was intentional. One of the things I've learned with the enforcers, at least from how I've been playing them, is that I can't spread them out. I need them very massed up, and then I can slowly kind of gain ground a little bit at a time. And then as I gain that ground, I'm not moving forward. I'm not pushing out as much as I'm taking, right? Like that's kind of how I look at it is I'm just taking ground from you. I'm not moving out to secure anything. I'm just slowly grinding forward to take it from you. Round 2, is that this one? Yeah. Jordan was his name. What a wonderful, wonderful human being he was. Let me see if I've got a better picture of it. I do. Give me a second. Boop, boop. Fantastically painted army. Look at that. Look at how clean that is, man. Beautiful desert themed marauders. Super, super friendly guy. We only made it through 3 rounds. And again, a lot of that was because he was real chatty. I'm pretty chatty. So we unfortunately spent probably more time talking than we should have. And again, another game where I learned a ton. This mission, we just placed objectives, and you can see them. There's one here. There's here. Like, they're in the middle here. And then you get points for controlling specific objectives. Like, he got more points for controlling these Warhammer objectives, and then I got more points for controlling the Mantic objectives. And that's just because of who placed them. And so that was a cool game, again, because I learned a lot. We only made it through 3 rounds. I think if we make it through the whole game, he probably still wins. I won't disillusion myself. I think even if we play the whole game, he still wins, but he blew me out at 3. And I think if we play the full 5, the game is much closer. And honestly, potentially jumps me into 3rd place. And again, I'm not in any way complaining. I'm simply saying this is me processing things after the fact, going, here's what I could have done differently. Here's how we could have benefited from finishing the game. Because we were in a spot when we finished where I was starting to really remove his stuff, and he was hitting a wall. He had his Rainmakers. So back here you see they're the melee Rainmakers. I forget what they're called. They're not, are they brawlers? I don't know. It's whatever the Mega Knob equivalent is. I can't remember it, but the fighty ones. So they're back here. As we're deploying, I thought, because he deployed first, I thought they were the Rainmakers. I didn't ask. I should have asked. So I'm looking, and I just was like, okay, those are over there. Those are his Rainmakers. They could just have this whole side of the board. I don't give 2 shits. So as you can see, most of my army is stacked in this corner as far away from these as I can get. Well, what ended up happening was his Rainmakers actually were a unit he got to hold back because he won the recon roll. So he got to hold that unit back and deploy it last. So they ended up going here. But by the time we finished, I think he had like 18 points to my 11 or 20 points to my 11. Like I said, he was really killing it. But he had lost all of this right here in this corner. I want to say this buggy was dead because one of them was a Bronco, I think it's called. One of them was like a shooty truck, and the other one was a transport. His Rainmakers were about to eat a charge from this handsome fella because it was his Rainmakers were kind of, he had skyscrapers here, Rainmakers here, and then my little Strider here, let's see, had actually made its way here. So he could have gone either way. He could have hit the skyscrapers or the Rainmakers. And then I had things pushing up this way also. By and large, I just avoided these, and it still ended up working out. Because I think even at turn 3, I don't think they had even made it into combat. Because he ran them down here to grab the objective, which was smart. It got him an early lead. But then turn 2, they still sat on the objective. And then turn 3 was finally when it was like, I'm going to bring this squad of boys that are over here, and then bring these up so we can start getting them into the game. So, but at that point, like I said, I had really started to remove things, and his efficiency was going way down because he had skyscrapers that were, and he had a fantastic play. And I don't think we can see the section of table it happened on, so we'll just kind of pretend it was this one right here. Because there's a, maybe it was this. I think there's something we can't see here from my picture. But he had him back here, and then I had a bunch of stuff kind of up here. And I think it was actually, it's over where this objective is, but a very similar setup. And he basically managed to like hit me in a triangle to where it was like I couldn't charge because he had something to help like mitigate that. And if I were to activate over there, then he'd charge me because I'd lose counter charge. And it was like really, really well done. And man, like I was really worried because that was between that and him killing my command unit. I thought, oh boy. But I managed to kind of start pushing back. And like I said, I'm sorry if this isn't as detailed of an overview as like I normally give, but I forgot to take notes, and it just was one of those like in the moment. I just normally I take pictures, take notes, and I just forgot. But overall, I learned a lot again, uh, and great time, fantastic human. Had a good time with him. And then turn around 3 was Mason Labs, which was cool because I had played against Marauders, but I hadn't played against Plague and I hadn't played against Mason Labs. So I got to learn a lot again this game. I feel bad because early on, Nick is his name, real nice dude. His dice were not the best very early on. Like he had these mortars with some anti-tank missiles, and he shot at my Strider, as you can see it here. It was out a little bit more, and he could shoot at it, and it was just one of those like he just missed with everything. And once he missed with everything, rather than just move on, he decided to keep shooting at the Strider, and I think that was out of frustration, like disappointment, like he just wanted to do something to it. And when his heavy weapons team over there didn't do anything, I think there was a little bit of a like, I'm gonna just make sure I do some kind of damage to this thing, and then he ended up not doing anything because of the heavy armor. But man, that was a brutal game. It was control, so it was chunks of the table. I struggled the first time I played this game. Like, I got friggin' hammered. The first time I played Control was just like, bro, I don't even understand how I play this with Enforcers. But again, if you look at my deployment, and this is actually, I think, first turn, like, we'd already started moving. But if you look, most of my stuff is bunched up in one quarter of the table. My jet bikes were all the way back in the corner down here, way back in the corner. So I could stay out of his shooting range for the most part and just have a unit strength 1 unit back there so that I could just score it. It's all I needed to do was score it. And then, I'd like go the bikes up, shoot something, and then hop back, just like be annoying. And again, like the defenders, real clutch, just forgot that they like had a bunch of rules. Shit happens. Um, and the main thing was that, you know, I knew I had to play a bit more of a static game this game just because he had some stuff that really hit hard, and I couldn't just go screaming into melee. Like, I had to fight on my terms. And so he kind of had to push into me, and I just had the range because he couldn't just sit. He had some things that had range, but like as you can see my Strider here, I could just sit and shoot. He's not going to hide very well from it. There's the dead buggy. Like he's not going to hide very well from the Strider because it's height 4. I can just kind of like shoot things. And so it was like, okay, well, you have to come out. I don't necessarily have to. And even if I do, if I want to, I can move into range, shoot you, and then move back and still force you to come out. Like I can sit here and kind of plink you. My plink shots are going to do more to you than your plink shots are going to do to me because I'm armor 6. And it was one of those like, this was the only game I think we went the full 5. And like I said, like early on, unfortunately for Nick, man, dice just were dice, and it just wasn't going his way. And I've been there. It's frustrating. He had a great attitude about it. We were able to joke about a lot of stuff. Like we had a great time, and he was just a fun, fantastic human also to interact with. And again, we learned. Like that's the main thing is when I got done with every game, I learned something new, and that's even better. So but I ended up winning round 1 and round 5. Uh, I ended up tying for 4th place. And again, I think it's based off the tournament points more so than your win-loss record. So I ended up with, I think it was 16 tournament points. And that's why I said, like, if the round 2, even if we did one more round, even if we did one more, I'm pretty sure I'm able to get 3rd just because I'm pretty sure I'm able to get at least 3 more tournament points because I know I could have killed one of his commanders for 2, and I know I could have got something in his deployment zone for another, I think 1 or 2. I forget how much that one was. So it's just one of those like, ah, oh well, that'll teach me for being jovial and friendly. But again, I learned a ton. One of the things that I had, and again, it's a big game with a lot of rules, so I'm not faulting anybody. But at one point, I was told Toxic does 2 damage instead of 1. And then I was looking, because again, I have Plague, and I wasn't looking because I was like, oh, that's wrong. I was just reading the Plague rules. Toxic is, if it does a damage on a 6-up, it does a 2nd damage. And so it was like, oh, okay. Well, that's my fault for not double checking that one. And again, I'm not mad. Like, I don't think it was malicious. I think it was just one of those like big game, a lot of rules, and people just make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I'm not even sad about it. And then the damage, I was told damage splashes, and I think that's only with regard to Toxic. But I took that to mean that damage splashes all the time, and maybe that's what was intended. But again, when I was looking at it, I was like, no, 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 because like devastating specifically says like you can only kill one model per attack, regardless of how much damage is done. Excess damage is just lost, so that's important. If you're out there playing, that's important to note. Is that toxic damage splashes. And if you don't know what splashes means, it just means it carries over to the next model. But devastating damage does not. So, and that's just because toxic damage is applied 1 damage at a time. So it's not even that it splashes, it's that you're just doing 1 damage at a time. So, let's see. Big shout out to Brian, uh, the tournament organizer. Super friendly guy. I enjoyed talking to him. The whole community was just fantastic. The gentleman who was, I assume, a Mantic employee and running everything, super nice, very, very chatty, and just seems like a good dude. And overall was one of the best tournament experiences I've had in a long time. and it was just a great community. I think there was 10 players. It sounds about right, somewhere in there. Somewhere between 8 and 12. I don't know if it was 10. I don't know if it was 8. I don't know if it was 12. I don't even remember how many tables there were. So, but all in all, like I said, fantastic time. What a great game. It does have its jank. Any game like this will. You're never going to have a perfect game, but fantastic game with very clean rules that make a lot of logical sense. They're easy where they need to be and complex enough that it doesn't feel like a just like overly simplified game. The biggest takeaway I got from the tournament was the terrain rules. I really got to see how terrain was intended to interact, and that's really where my biggest hangup was anyway. And so I really appreciate that. Being able to see how the terrain interacts. Like all the hills were height 2. So again, if you're coming from 40K or AOS or any game like that, in Firefight, all the terrain has an assigned height. So like these little low walls up here in the upper right hand corner, those have height 1, which means they give cover to anything basically between height 2 and height, what is it, 4? Because if you're 4 heights or more bigger, you can't claim cover. So it's like 2, 3, and 4, you get to claim cover. Yeah, 2, 3, and 4. You get to claim cover. Height 5, you wouldn't get to claim cover from behind that. Height, these I think were height, I don't remember what these were. The hills were height 2, and then all your units have a height. And most of the time, it makes a lot of sense. Like infantry are all height 2 for the most part, so that they can stand behind height 1 barricades. So again, it makes sense. It's a very clean system once you learn it. It's just when I was looking at it, I was like, I don't understand what I'm looking at. And now that I've played it and I've seen it, it all makes sense. So again, just a big shout out to Mantic. What a fantastic game. Big shout out to Brian. Did a great job running the event. And then, big thank you to all my opponents for being patient and going slow and just understanding that I'm relatively new to the game. I understand the strategy is just understanding how the rules interact. And now I have a much greater understanding for that. So, if you haven't played Firefight, check it out. Great game. They have a lot of 40K analogs. Just put 40K models on the table for now and just check it out. It's worth it. It's such a fun game. What a great rule set. And then, like I said, I'll try to get some battle reports in, but within the next couple weeks, you're going to see at least a immediate reaction type of thing and then like a full-on review, or maybe I'll just do the full-on review since I've already played it a lot. And we'll start kind of walking people through different stages of the game, like I've done with Wasteland Warfare, like I've done with 40K, Blood Bowl. Like we will just do these walkthroughs that I am good for them. I will show you how it all works. I will break it all down, I promise. I think that's where we're going to end it today. So thanks for watching. Make sure you check it out, and you guys have a great day. I think that'll do it, man.